Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, which Wildcat is the biggest threat to the Red Raiders? We investigate next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, and a few things to dive into today as we prepare for the Wildcats of Arizona, fitting the description of the next potential victim. Texas Tech going on the road for a 10 p.m. kick Central Standard Time on Saturday night. Get used to it. Next couple of days, I'm thinking about just texting you at midnight to see if you're getting prepared for that.
It would be halftime. It would be halftime.
Yeah, that'd be halftime. Just about the time the marching band is rolling out. But want to get into some different things for you, focused on Arizona, focused on Arizona here today. Also want to get to something that has been a positive trend for Texas Tech since the season began. Curious about some reasons for it. Is it just coincidental, or are we finding something there? I'll explain in just a bit on what I'm referencing, but wanted to, of course, get a download on the opposition and take a listen to some comments from Arizona's head coach, Brent Brennan. I want to get to something that I think is really scary for Texas Tech, and whether we're talking offense or defense, it's on the outside as far as a big challenge for the Red Raiders, and curious to pick your brain as to maybe what the biggest threat is that Arizona's got cooking for the Red Raiders. But first, I want to get into a more general thought from Coach Brennan as it relates to something really interesting that developed leading up to the Utah game. And I suppose just a week removed from that still remains a very interesting storyline. They had a change at offensive play caller. And you go into a ball game like that on the road against a top 10 opponent, maybe not the best time for such a thing, but kind of sounds like maybe it was something they were working towards, and obviously can't argue with the results as they get that win against Utah. I will let Arizona head coach Brent Brennan explain further.
When we first brought Coach Babers in here, from the beginning, the intent was for him to really help the young coaches grow and develop, and he's been doing a fantastic job with the offensive staff. And watching that over time, we felt like going into the bye week was the right time for Coach Atkins to, with the help of Dino, to kind of step into that role. And, with the game against Utah, we felt like it was a strategic advantage for us to not disclose that before. And so that was how we approached it. And, Coach Babers he was on board with this. He's been great about it. We've had a lot of conversations about it. And he's incredibly supportive of Matt and the staff, and everyone's working really well together. And Coach Babers is such an important part of what we're doing here, and I really, really value his contribution to our offense, to the players, to the coaching, and to the mentorship he's providing for our young coaches.
Some really interesting things to decipher there in that answer. Somewhat of a description of something I guess maybe they were building toward. I don't know if it was so quickly early on this season, but then, of course, you also get the de facto, well, he's very supportive of this move. He's very supportive of this change, which is something you're typically going to hear. But, hell, they got to win, and the biggest win of the year so far for them. So I don't really know what to make of this and whether or not it's an advantage, disadvantage for Texas Tech rolling into the weekend.
Yeah, a little background on how we got here. So Brent Brennan shows up in January at University of Arizona. He came from San Jose State. He was at Arizona years ago when Dick Tomey was there several years ago. So that's his connection. But when Jed Fish left Arizona to go take the Washington job that had been vacated because Nick Saban retired and Kalen DeBoer went from Washington to Alabama. So that's kind of, Dino Babers, who they're talking about, and he was the head coach at Syracuse last year. So it was a pretty big get Coach Babers on as a coordinator after being a head coach at Syracuse for the last several years. Okay, so we fast forward to present time, and they start the season out, and you've got some of these pieces at QB and at receiver, and it just wasn't. You go back and look at what they did against Northern Arizona. They kind of hung around with Northern Arizona. Wasn't real impressive. Then they show up in Manhattan, Kansas on a Friday night. Not a conference game, mind you. Not a conference game. And they get worked and just don't have a lot of juice offensively. So then hit the bye week, and they decide to make this change. And now everybody has become aware of it. Matt Atkins is a guy that came from San Jose State with Coach Brennan. I think that was the what they had talked about. At least that's what they're saying now. They had kind of talked about this during the hiring process of everybody back in January. Hey, eventually this is what we want to do. Maybe it happened quicker than they thought or weren't sure. I think Coach Babers had said earlier in the week a couple things. One, everybody's got an ego, but we got to drop that E around here so we can go. He dropped that cheesy line. I thought that was interesting. And then he said something to the effect of, the same plays are being called. It's what order we're calling them in. And his role isn't changing anything other than on a Saturday afternoon, so like everything. And he came off as very classy. And I do think that he had said, man, I'm not here to get in anybody's way. Coach Atkins has really accelerated in understanding everything much quicker. And so it was just time. Now, the one interesting thing is Atkins is the tight ends coach as well. He's the passing game coordinator and the tight ends coach. Well, guess who was featured last week versus the Utes? Their tight end, Keon Burnett, I think had like 3 catches for like less than 50 yards in the previous games prior to that. Last week, I want to say he had like 7 catches for 80 yards. So if you want to know one change that's just right there in your face, Coach Atkins, the new play caller, is definitely going to feature the guys in his room. So, now you have a better feel for it. It's not just going to be thrown to Teteroa McMillan. It'll be thrown to Keon Burnett as well. So there you go.
Yeah, you can't argue with the results of obviously a successful first outing, but curious to see if maybe there was something that was catching Utah off guard as far as some tendencies or some looks that's a result of the change. Is it something now that Texas Tech can take advantage of defensively 2 weeks into it? I know if you were thinking about making a change as a play caller mid-season, I wouldn't be feeling very confident as a fan that this is, things going somewhat according to plan or something we have been building toward. But again, can't argue with the result the first time out. As for some of the personnel on the field, first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching the game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. As for some of the personnel on the field for Arizona, I wanted to get to some scary individuals on the outside. And both of these guys on both sides of the ball, offensively and defensively, you can kind of take your pick. I want to take a listen first to Brent Brennan talking about their cornerback, who you mentioned on yesterday's show, I believe, or sometime earlier this week, one Tacario Davis, who has got a characteristic that is highly enviable among all defensive backs. Here's Coach Brennan again talking about his cornerback.
It's great to see Tacario smiling and having fun. I think he really cut it loose and enjoyed the moment. He responded to the big stage and the big crowd the way you would expect him to. And as a lifetime receiver, player, coach, the space I've always operated in, the number one thing you don't like dealing with as a wideout or someone that's coaching them is length. I'm just telling you, like that was when I was game planning, that's the number one thing I was looking for was length and how we were going to negotiate that. Just because it's especially with some of our receivers are bigger body guys. And so you like to use those big body guys against smaller people, right? It's harder for those smaller corners to work around somebody like T-Mac because he's 6'4.5" and 215 pounds, right? But with Bobo, he's got such length that length becomes a problem. He can take vertical speed off you, and then he can get his hands on footballs a lot of other guys can't.
Let's go ahead and take a listen also to Coach Brennan talking about the guy he mentions there in Tetaroa McMillan, a.k.a. T-Mac.
T-Mac is such a great player. You want him on the field all the time. You also know that you need to spell him so that you can have his best, at the end of a game, when it's needed. And that is a coaching. I've fought that my whole life with great wide receivers. I had the same problem at Oregon State with Brandon Cooks. I was like, and the offensive play caller's on there, and he's like, why isn't Cooks in there? It's third down. I'm like, just because you just ran him on back-to-back verticals, he has no juice. It's just it's a hard one, and he is in great shape. He also plays incredibly hard. He blocks hard. We have him running all over the field. We're moving him at all different positions, and he's we're asking a lot of him also. And so there's a balance there for us offensively. Also, I thought it was great to see Devin show up on Saturday Night Hyatt. I thought it was great. Chris Hunter starting to make some moves out there for us. Jeremiah Patterson. So we're starting to have some other guys that we can get T-Mac out for a little bit and just give him a blow and have confidence with who we're putting out there.
Chris, I know the offensive guys obviously always get a lot of attention, and these do as well, both as wide receiver and their quarterback also, deservedly so. But I was kind of wondering, of those two that we've highlighted here in Davis or McMillan, who's actually the bigger threat to what Texas Tech is trying to do or what they have been as a team. I put that to you off the air before we began. You expressed 0.0 seconds of doubt that it was actually McMillan. So I'm wondering why you go with him as it compares to the context of this matchup.
Yeah, these are two guys that are going to play in the NFL. They have the measurables. They are making plays. I mean, Davis is the reigning Big 12 Player of the Week in the league. I think he had 5 pass breakups alone in Salt Lake City. I want to say that 2 or 3 of those were on 4th down. So, I mean, he showed up big time. I think they try to, send tight ends out there and short yardage stuff, and Utah was trying to throw it, and he just, using that length, as you hear, 6'4" corners is kind of unicornish. Now you had what you felt like were 2 long corners in Malik Dunlap and Rashad Williams, which was very unique to us around here. But this is a different level of player, I think, and he's still kind of somewhat figuring it out. But McMillan is, and I'm listening to Coach Brennan describe how, he's so good. He does everything. We're trying to figure out ways to just get him a rest occasionally. And then it's like I got people looking over here like, why is he not in the game? It should sound very familiar to how, like, we talk about Taj Brooks and, like, how we were sitting here talking all summer. You got to have depth there. And then yet when it's 3rd and 2, late in the third quarter, and he's not in there, you're like, what are you doing? Cam Dickey or Jacoby Williams, or at that point, Cameron Valdez, you can't, you got to have so very similar conversations, I think, when you have great players, and that's what, McMillan is. He makes me nervous just because I think the ball's going to go to him. He's got, I want to say, 38 more targets than anybody else on their team. So when this Fafita kid starts running around scrambling, where do you think the ball's going? More often than not. I mean, by a lot. And I think the thing with Davis is if he's over here, you can work the other side of the field. I mean, so you can kind of semi-eliminate him. And I mean, he can't take away Caleb Douglas, Josh Kelly, and Coy Aiken. Maybe one of them. Maybe limit one of them, but he can't eliminate one of those. But I think he'll have a very hard time taking McMillan out of the game. He's going to catch it. He's going to make plays. What scares you there, and one of the biggest keys for you in this game Saturday night, is what he does after he catches it. If you can just let him catch it and get him down, I think you'll be okay. But it's that 6'5", 215-pound frame, and he plays big. when he breaks it, if there's not enough help over there, he's gone. And that's his yards after the catch is what really scares me. But that's why he is much more of a factor. But I'll tell you, we're talking two personnel, okay, like a corner and a wideout. But what won them the game in Utah, and this is what shocked everybody, because this is Utah's playbook, is they went and beat Utah up front on both sides of the ball. And that's what really makes me the most nervous, because that's probably where you're, I don't know, weakest, least experienced, not a ton of depth. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean,
oh, yeah.
That's what worries me about this particular team for Texas Tech is like up front. Can you hold up? Can you impose your will? I don't know. We've already heard your head coach talking about pass rush non-existent. Like we're just standing up, we're pushing, we're fighting around. Like might as well thumb wrestle. I mean, we're not getting anything else done, so let's figure out who wins. Whatever. Offensive line wise, you've shuffled it enough. Maybe you've found something, but I don't know if you're good enough to just, hey, here's what we're doing. We've talked about this. Like the train's coming through. I just don't know if that's who you are. Taj needs to be that. Your tight ends have to be involved. There's a lot of things you have to check to the right play and make sure. Somebody like Taj has to, okay, if we're calling it to go outside, then go outside. Don't try to cut it up and get stonewalled. So that's the, kind of the look at Arizona. And then defensively, they're going to blitz you. I think you're anticipating a lot of blitz because they run a 4-man front. What did Washington State do? Who also ran a 4-man front? You've seen these other odd fronts and all that, but Washington State, they had a 4-man front and they blitzed you. So it's your trenches that maybe scare me the most, but McMillan, he's 1A if there's one. I don't get caught up in a corner. I think you can eliminate him. He may make a play or two or limit one of your skill guys, but I just don't get too concerned about him, although seeing a 6'4" corner would certainly be interesting.
Well, and I obviously can't disagree with anything you're saying about McMillan or Davis and obviously the trenches too, but I guess I was kind of, I don't know if it's a devil's advocate or what, but I'm sort of thinking, all right, McMillan gets his as other wide receivers have gotten theirs against Texas Tech, and you've still found a way to survive, mostly because you've been able to get yours with guys like Josh Kelly. And if that's a threat that is neutralized, what does that look like then? Because while I do agree when you say, he can't shut down Kelly, Douglas, and Aiken individually, I wonder if Kelly is shut down, and that may be like an extreme term to use, or if he's just drastically limited from what we've seen so far this season. Well, what kind of opportunities are there for Douglas or Aiken? Have their plays been made in the shadow of the attention that Josh Kelly is commanding? I know it's not, happening like that all the time, but I was kind of curious if I had to pick which one, you kind of allow to have a great game. I wonder if I might just say, all right, let McMillan go wild because everybody else has gone wild on us in the pass game, but don't take away our pass game because that's been quite a boost for Texas Tech. But I certainly see what you're saying as far as those two players are concerned. And yeah, Taj Brooks is not someone that's going to be shut down by a cornerback. So maybe it's a big day for 28 as far as picking up even more of the load, if that's fathomable offensively. I was curious, do you think Arizona's defensive front, is it better than Cincinnati's? Because I know we talked about some bell cows for Cincinnati. I don't know if individually Arizona has that, but are they maybe a better group, or how would you compare those two defensive fronts?
I think they're probably similar to Arizona State in that what you just said, just kind of solid. But
gotcha.
I probably have to have a different opinion after what they did up in Utah. Utah doesn't lose home games, and they're the best boring program or one of in the country. Just because they have this blueprint, they're physical. They don't screw stuff up. It's very similar to Kansas State, Oklahoma State, all this stuff that we get used to. Yeah. Just a little less sexy at times at different things, but they just have this blue collar mentality. And then Arizona went in and kind of did that to them. You certainly make valid points on Davis. I think if he were to take away Josh Kelly, because what Josh Kelly leads the country in is third down receptions.
Mm-hmm.
leads the country in third down receptions. That moves the chains. However, we also have to understand you've been hurt by other receivers this year, sure. McMillan's already gone for 300 yards in a game this year. I don't want to see what that looks like.
That is insane to even
300 yards in a game. And it's just that's video game stuff. So that's the fun part about having great players. And your guys need to be great too. I just wish you had more of that on the defensive side that we truly knew were going to be great. But you hope Lux can play.
Yeah.
Baskerville needs to play a good game. Your interior linebackers need to play a good game. Baron Morton needs to play a good game. And this is all, yes, mistake-free, goes without saying, but I'm talking about there's going to come a time where somebody's got to make a tough one, a 50-50 ball, whether that's intercepting it or making the catch, or you got to make a throw or whatever. You're going to have to get it done. I mean, that's just the way life is on the road. And if you're going to continue to try to win close games, I mean, it's a bit tougher, and you're going to have to work against calls sometimes and all that stuff. But yeah, you need some, because they legitimately do. I don't think super deep. They have Bonifay. They have an offensive tackle that's 6'5", 340. He is somebody that is a second or third round draft pick. And the quarterback is tiny. He's like 5'11", 180. Okay. I say tiny compared to what you would think of as an NFL quarterback. He runs around. He's not looking to run it and burn you. Now, maybe they turn that loose but he just runs around there, and it's like you can only cover guys for so long. And we've seen that movie before, and that's what he does. And when he does, he's finding his high school teammate, Teteroa McMillan. So,
yeah, that's one thing I was going to bring up additionally to the guys we discussed. That quarterback seems really comfortable throwing on the run. Like, I mean, it's almost like, I'd love to leave the pocket, especially to the right, and roll out there and chuck one downfield. He seems really comfortable on the move. I hate to compare anybody to Patrick Mahomes, but it's almost like when the ish hits the fan for that offense and that quarterback has to move, look out, because it just became more dangerous. Like, oh yeah, you collapsed the pocket. Great job, because now he's at his deadliest when he's got to go out there and like improvise.
And that's the game within the game too, where if you're gonna flush him, make him go to his left, not his right.
Yeah.
Where he really hurt Utah, last weekend was rolling right and just punishing them with some deep throws that were highlight plays. But if you're gonna force him out, make him roll to his left, which is be a bit trickier and less deadly, if you will. But yeah, these are the things that are going to largely decide this one. But yeah, he's going to be a handful.
Something else that will decide this one was something that we referenced on yesterday's show when talking about successful road recipes. Something else that will decide this one was something that we referenced on yesterday's show when talking about successful road recipes. And that was in part avoiding self-inflicted wounds. And that in part is related to the penalty column. Was actually chopping it up with one of our Matador Mob insiders, our guy Jeff, who was texting from South Korea, stationed in South Korea, texted in the middle of the night, said, sorry for the late text. I said, stuff your sorries in a sack, Jeff. Thank you for your service, and thanks for being a Matador Mob insider. But we were talking about the penalties and sort of what has come to be now almost halfway into the season. You started out in disaster mode, 11-10 the first 2 weeks, got it down a tick, worked on some single-digit weekends, 8 and 9, and then only 5 against Cincinnati. So I'm sort of wondering, Chris, is this just kind of case-by-case coincidence? Are you figuring something out? Are some younger players maybe calming down? And we cannot ignore the fact that a large percentage of those penalties were also based in some pre-snap stuff along the offensive line, really just the offensive line in general. So I wonder maybe if some shuffle has helped there. I don't know. But what have you made of what has obviously can't be avoided been a positive trend, thankfully, in the penalty column?
You've been penalized 43 times this year. 21 of the 43 are either false starts or holding penalties on the offensive line. So half of your penalties come from pre-snap or holding. There's really not. I mean, there's I think 4 pass interference penalties on defense. There's really not anything else like position or specific penalty that just jumps out at you, other than basically half of them being that offensive line part of it. I think you've probably found something. I think that maybe it is trending the right way, which you thought it would. Last year, this wasn't a problem. Joey's teams are usually pretty disciplined, and he wants them playing hard. And if you're going to have an effort penalty, because I don't think he has a problem with a pass interference penalty. Sometimes it's so subjective that, like, be physical, and if we get called for it, we get called for it. But, like, don't just give them something. But it's the before the snap stuff, because you're just mentally weak, or you just can't hold your water, or you're just not paying attention, whatever it may be. That's the stuff that drives coaches crazy. But I think that it has trended in the right way. And this was one of the many problems you had in Pullman. You were penalized double-digit times, and it was like, yeah, might as well. Let's just tack this on too. We can't hold on to the ball. We're throwing it to the other team. We're filming kickoffs. Might as well just see a bunch of yellow hankies out there too, and just call them on the road team. Yeah, well, by all means. Can't do that. Can't do that traditionally on the road. The penalty and the turnover bugaboo, it's usually enough to undo you, and it was that night. And you have to be really good and a lot of margin for error if you're going to go turn it over and be heavily penalized on the road and still win or have a chance. And that's not who you are.
Kind of like looking in the mirror at Arizona. Cincinnati was a very lightly penalized team a week ago, or I really mean for the season, and then even lighter a week ago, only committed 2 in the game against Texas Tech. So that was one of the first things I was curious to see about Arizona. But 9 penalties, 10 penalties, 9 and 5 is the way that Arizona's gone. It's almost kind of a mirror image of what Texas Tech has done to start the season. And I don't know, maybe we shouldn't call it a trend. If it's 11, 10, 8, 9, and then 5, we just had our best week is maybe all we should say, because it was still pretty heavy prior to that one. But you're right. It really hadn't been something within the McGuire era that has consistently been a problem for you. So I don't really know what to attribute it to begin the year, but we know going on the road, it ain't something that you can be working with and still expect to have a chance to win. And that's kind of the way I feel in general about either a turnover conversation or the penalty conversation. If you can avoid these things, I don't know if you win, but I think you're in it in the fourth quarter. You've got a chance to win whenever winning time arrives.
Which is all you can ask for.
Yeah, and if you're not doing those things, then a margin's probably too big and probably too little time to do anything about it or something like that. But you just want to be there in the fourth. And I tell you what, thankfully, from a turnover standpoint, that's not been a similar conversation to the penalties. It's kind of like, I guess, the inverse of what we were talking about last year when we're just asking for somebody to stop giving the football away. But this year, thankfully, that column's been pretty clean. I'm knocking on every piece of wood in the office right now because I'm not trying to jinx that before your biggest road game of the season so far. But that's been a good thing to see.
If you go put up another 4 or 5 penalty game this weekend, I think you do feel like it's definitely a trend or trending in the right way. I think you can make that statement. And if I'm picking and choosing, I'd much rather be bad in the penalty category and be really good in the turnover margin category. If you're asking for stuff, I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Holding on to the football, the short fields, just potential turnovers that score points for the other team, whatever. I mean, you can flag me some. I'll be okay with it as long as you can. So, there's definitely a pecking order on things that you need to do or be really good at. But that's why I say, like in Pullman, it was like you were turning over left and right. But the penalties were just like piling on at that point. Like, of course. Of course. I feel bad enough as it is, but just punish me and back me up even further, So
just a little salt in the wound.
Exactly. And then you find out that was one of the Pac-12 crews that was left out and surly about everything, and I'm like, that's just great. I mean, that's awesome. So whatever. But the turnover thing, that is massive in this game. And knock on wood, if your quarterback and running back will hold on to it or take care of it, and you can't have your punt returner put it on the carpet again, because that's He had an issue in Pullman, and we saw one last week, which that was friendly fire, by the way. His own player knocked it out of his hand against Cincinnati last week, but he just got it. It was like, what was the cartoon Dora the Explorer, like swipe or no swiping? You'll learn about all that now that you've got a kid. But he just got his rock took, man, there in Pullman. Like, I had it, now I don't. I mean, what are we doing? That's the only thing. He's fumbled it 3 times. That is the only thing you can talk about Josh Kelly that's in a negative way. And I don't know if last week was necessarily his fault, but it just can't happen, as Kenny Perry has said. Can't do that in games like this on the road.
And on the officiating front, thank God we're back into the land of highly trusted, highly credible Big 12 officials. Nothing to worry about here. All right, Chris, we are nearing the end of the week and about to ship you off for a late night in Arizona, but we got one more round before we do that. So appreciate the time as always and looking forward to it.
Absolutely. You hope to see everybody out at Rudy's tonight. If you don't have anything going, come see me, Coach McGuire, and all that stuff. We'll have Coach Yates talking some secondary, and I think Joseph Plunk and all that. I'm going to talk to him about, of all things, chess, because he's a stud ace chess player. So, yeah, how about that? A little preview. Anyway, okay. But, yeah, appreciate the time. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow and recap what went on tonight at Rudy's Barbecue.
Yes, sir. Enjoyed it and appreciate everybody being out there. Thanks to those everydayers who are with us every day. It's right there in the name. And if you are an everydayer, why not be a Matador Mob insider? Check out the link there in the show notes. Try on a 14-day free trial. It is your direct line to Chris and myself from South Korea at all hours of the night. Anytime, any subject, you can give us a holler. Just become a Matador Mob insider. Check out the link in the show notes or on our X page at Locked On Tech. And, of course, one of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So thanks to those who are regularly doing that. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for the time, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.